Let's give him some time to come in. So yeah, let's just start because the people are rolling in right now and we're a little late on time. I'm sorry about that. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm glad to be able to welcome you in the name of MediaNet and, oh, wrong direction, MediaNet, and especially GamesNet and our partner Genvid Technologies to our panel tonight, which is called Unorthodox Methods of, no, Jonathan, please help me.
Unorthodox BizDev in unusual times.
Exactly, that's it. Thank you. My name is Lars Frohman. I'm the new head of GamesNet here at MediaNet. So in my role as that, I welcome you to the panel tonight. And since I already needed his help, I'm going to hand the word right over to Jonathan Munoz from Genvid, who's going to lead the whole panel. And I hope we have a great time tonight. So if at any time you have questions you want to ask in the Q&A later, please do not hesitate. Click the F&A or Q&A button at the bottom of the screen and put in your question, and we will handle it later. All right. So without further ado, Jonathan Munoz. Thank you.
Sweet. Thank you for the introduction, Lars. So like we mentioned, we're going to be doing a panel on unorthodox BizDev in unusual times. It's primarily focused on how have things changed, how have things stayed the same. And for context, I'm Jonathan Munoz, so I work at Genvid as business development. I'll be moderating the panel, so I'll be spending much of my time just asking questions of our awesome panelists here. As a quick note, we had to make a substitute for Tiffany Otto from IndieCade. She wasn't able to make it today, so we have Chris Hamilton joining us instead. And for introductions, I'll actually let Brendan kick it off.
Hello, thanks for having me, John. I do investments and acquisitions for Riot Games. I've been at Riot for about 6 years, and I do some kind of traditional biz dev, but I think the corp dev work I do has a lot of similar challenges for the times we're going through right now.
Cool. Astrid, do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm Astrid, and I, together with 2 other people, run Triple Topping Games. We do niche indie games. We are publishing both Welcome to Elka and Ynglet later this year. And when not doing that, I'm also working as an advisor to Counter Knights, which is a game fund.
Hamilton, you want to top us off?
Sure thing. Christopher Hamilton. I'm working with Jonathan at Genvid Technologies as the Director of Development Relations in Europe. I'm also on the board of the IGDA and the Finnish Game Jam. And I just work a lot with indies in sort of those capacities. I'm also an advisor to For Good Games, which is a game developer that's trying to make games for charitable actions.
Awesome. Well, thanks for all of you joining us today. So I want to kick us off. So, it's kind of obvious all of us are, having a lack of physical events and travel. And I really wanted to get into, like, with everything that's been going on, like, how have you guys, or how have you all needed to adjust to do business? Like, I wanted to know, like, what are some of the biggest changes you and your teams have made?
I make my bed more. As you know, I do essentially all of our business development out of my bedroom now, right? And so people like this get a chance to see into my life in a way that I think that they're not used to necessarily. So I think kind of some of the distance between like your professional persona and your personal persona gets shortened. And I think that that's reflected in a lot, even the way I interact with people. I think there's something, the immediate relationship comfort that you get from seeing somebody in their natural habitat, I do think kind of accelerates relationships. And so I think my style has changed to some degree. I feel like a little bit less formal and a little bit more casual.
I think working, like in Denmark, we're actually back at office because the country is open, but we also worked for home, and the rest of the world is working from home. It's been like, of course, it's sad why we are working from home, but it's a transition we were trying to do in Triple Topping to travel less, because for small indie studios like us, it costs a lot to go to GDC, it costs a lot to go to PAX and meet people. So it's been a good, like, okay, now let's do it. You have to now do business development and meet new people, but you can only do it online. So I reach out more to people where I don't have an email and where I don't have someone to introduce me and talk with them on Twitter, and try to set up meetings. And I actually enjoyed that. And yeah, the little bit more casual vibe to it is really good. I think that's helping as well, because you don't get to meet people the same way. So you have to lower and be a little bit more, bring the coffee, or be okay with being in your bedroom, so kids running around.
Likewise, we've really put more of an emphasis on leveraging personal networks and just getting out to people in ways that I normally wouldn't. Normally at trade shows, a lot of people come to you and you're able to have meaningful discussions with them and show them things. And now it's kind of, oh, maybe I'm looking for people from this particular company. Do I have a friend that can make an introduction? Or there are other online channels where I can reach out to people and maybe make an introduction and then schedule demos and other follow-ups after that. But it's really kind of changed the whole outreach in a different sort of way.
Gotcha. And I'm kind of curious because it's interesting, Astrid, that you've gone from being in quarantine to now kind of things are back open in Denmark. Have you noticed that you've had to, and this is open to everybody, but have you all had to iterate pretty heavily as things have gone month by month? Because, at the beginning, everyone was kind of closed off and shut down to a certain extent, and now people are getting kind of used to it. Have you noticed a lot of kind of iteration on how you've approached people or how you've worked with partners over these last couple months?
I think for me, I'm fairly used to work internationally. So it's normal for me to have calls on weird hours and things like even in the middle of the night sometimes. I think if I could give it advice to other studios out there, is that they need to look at the workday a little bit differently. If you want to do business development and reach out to people, set off each, okay, I'm going to schedule my LA time calls each Monday, so you don't end up being on all the time, because online makes us okay, you can now always be available. So one of the things I did is I adjusted my email to say hey, I know I'm emailing you now, but it's because it's office hours in Denmark. So try to keep your office hours and still reach out to people internationally.
I really like that you did that.
It's been an ongoing process. Yeah.
I really like that you did that. I actually should adopt exactly that, because every time we would email back and forth, I saw that and I was like, that's so smart.
But otherwise, people jump on the phone and then they start texting you. Even though it's 1 a.m. and they're up with a kid, then they're oh, it's maybe a good opportunity and you don't want to miss out.
I gotcha. Brendan, I'm really curious for you. What has it been like? Obviously, because in LA, we had such a heavy shutdown and now things aren't looking great again. How have things changed for you over the months? Has it been, kind of business as usual? Has it been significantly different?
I mean, I would definitely not call anything business as usual these days. I think the initial transition period was really abrupt. It was, we were I think we might have to shut down, and 2 days later I was home. And I haven't left since. And so there's not a lot of change, I think, over the weeks or months since then, but that early adjustment period was really abrupt. And yeah, I think like everybody else kind of mentioned, you find new norms and adjust slowly but surely. I think early on people would try to hush their kids out of the room a little bit, I'm working in here, and now they're sitting on their lap talking to you, joining the meeting. And honestly, I see that as kind of a welcome evolution in general. It's why not be able to bring your honest self to work? And so I hope that's one thing that at least sticks around a little bit when this is all over.
Nice.
Yeah. I think for me, when I started, I went into this I can work all the time mode. And since most of the people I'm working with are in the States, I ended up really shifting my whole schedule to the point where I was constantly working until 4 or 5 in the morning and sleeping until noon, which was a little weird. And then I sort of broke out of that. And then now I have certain days where I have people kind of east of me. I have a couple of days where I'm up earlier in the day. Most days I still have calls later in the evening, but I take breaks in the afternoon to go for walks and to get some activities in. And I'm actually looking forward. I'm excited to have an actual business meeting here in Helsinki, a face-to-face meeting coming up either this week or early next week. And so it's a welcome change, but I think it's still there's still going to be an evolution to how all this goes, and there's still a lot of concerns as to what the fall is going to look like. So I think a lot of what we're dealing with now is here to stay, at least for the next year.
Yeah. And kind of on that topic of, us continuing to have to work with that in mind, like, how are you all maintaining your relationships with existing partners?
I mean, I think this is one place where being in the games industry helps a lot, is that it's not weird to be like, hey, let's get online and play a game of TFT or a game of League of Legends or something. Like, I think in a lot of other industries, if you reached out to a business partner and you're like, hey, do you want to spend your casual time in the evening talking to me? That would feel really inappropriate. But I think in our industry, it's a really like fun, kind of comfortable way to, continue to invest in each other. And I think, being willing to play a ranked or competitive mode with somebody whose MMR is way below yours is a great way to win a deal.
Chris, what's it been like for you in Finland?
So, I mean, for me, there have been a number of sort of Friday evening business dev drink meetings that have gone through, or even Saturday meetings. It's also a lot of online games, a lot of kind of fun stuff that's been just a way to stay connected to people, because there were people that I would normally meet up with either in Finland or at regional events, and it was a way to stay connected. And I've used a lot of online events just to reach out to people that I haven't seen all that often. I have one friend that was kind of trapped in Australia for all these months, trapped probably in a good way for her. But when I saw her like at a conference, I was like, oh, hey, we just need to have a call and catch up. And, I've really tried to leverage a lot of those sort of meet to match people in the system that I know that I haven't seen to say, I may not actually have any business to discuss with you, but I just really want to catch up and find out how you're doing.
Yeah, it's the same for me. Like, I write people more directly and actually open up the conversation to more than just about business, but also like maybe remember to congratulate people on their birthday and ask them how they are. Yeah.
Or get excited that someone's game is coming out, like in your case?
Yeah.
So we've touched on how we've been able to maintain relationships with people we already know, but one of, I think, the dreaded things both on the receiving and potentially sending end is like cold calling people or reaching out to people you don't directly know, or someone may not be able to provide you a warm intro. And so I was really curious, how have you all been attempting to connect with new potential partners or new people that you'd want to do business with? Like, what have you found effective there?
Like in where we are in the studio right now, it's not that I'm looking for so many new partners, but there's a lot of people that reach out to me. Like other small indie studios just text me directly or find my email, so they both contact me on like LinkedIn, on Twitter, and Facebook. And that have increased a lot during the lockdown, and that is so welcomed, because what can you do if you want to have advice on starting your studio, or if you need connection to a publisher? That is the only way to do it, and I just want to encourage people and say that's totally fine to text me on Twitter, and then we'll figure something out. So if I were in the same situation, I would definitely do the same.
Yeah, I'll echo that. We get a lot of inbound on Twitter. And you might not get a response right away. I don't check it quite as religiously during the workday as I do my email, but I think that's a really, there's just so many ways to get in touch with the type of people you're trying to talk to right now. And as always, I think a warm intro goes a very long way. And so, the simple LinkedIn of who do I know and how could I get that connection is always a good first step.
Yeah. Additionally, in Finland, we have a number of active Discord and Slack channels that have a variety of people that are out there. I'm also really involved with the IGDA mentor cafes and mentor at a number of incubators. And so I've been doing a lot of outreach in that way. And that has created a lot of inbound requests for, hey, can you help me with problem X or situation Y? And that's generated a lot of contacts or people that I can then leverage to reach out to other people.
Gotcha. So it sounds like there's a number of good ways for people to reach out to both you and other BD folks. But have you guys, without naming names, have there been any occurrences of someone reaching out to you where it's like, dude, don't do this, or like, why are you going about it this way? Basically, like any face palms?
I don't think I've had any face palms. I think there's a spectrum of effective to ineffective. you know, I'm also hiring right now, so I'm getting a lot of inbound interest about the role. And so that's a really interesting way to kind of compare a large number of people against each other very quickly. And like anything else, I think you want to stand out, but in a good way. So, you know, something that's authentic about who you are and why you do what you do and why you think it'd be a meaningful connection with the person you're reaching out to is always going to be more effective to me than trying to stand out in some perhaps less professional or less interesting way.
I think that's really good advice, actually. So I kind of want to change topics now. I want to know, because a lot of companies, you know, are being more risk averse while others seem to be willing to try new experimental projects. Have you all, excuse me, observed some kind of trend in what developers are doing? Have you been seeing more experimental pitches coming your way? Are you yourselves trying to think about how you could do things significantly differently? What have been your observations so far?
I think the way I would pitch a game would be very similar. Have a demo, have something that works, and know your budget and your audience and so on. And like if I can like pivot from being triple topping in Count on Ice, I can see people are pitching us fairly the same way as it's always worked. You just maybe need to get a little bit more materials because you don't have that like conversation that you can have on a show floor where you're like, oh yeah, I forgot that, I maybe have an answer. So you maybe need to get a bit more material when pitching in.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think early on we saw deal flow slow down a little bit just as uncertainty, there was so much uncertainty about the transition period that I think everybody was kind of slowing down and waiting to see where things would kind of suss out. But I think now that everybody's adapted to somewhat of a new normal, things feel almost back to normal as far as like deal flow goes. And I think the people, you know, especially in our industry where I think a lot of companies are fortunate to be doing okay at this time, you know, the businesses that are going to keep operating are kind of just like, we got to keep working. So there's a lot of that has not changed.
Yeah, I just think that it's changed a bit in the sense that outreach in a way will probably result in a quick 20-minute, 30-minute call that will then have, you know, we'll end up scheduling a later call where I can actually go through demos and do a sort of a bigger, more extensive pitch later once I know that they're interested. So we're not wasting anybody's time, but like if I was there on the floor, I could probably do much more of the actual demoing and do more of a hook. And I find that now it's more of a staggered approach where I have to sort of get them interested in a shorter meeting and then schedule a longer follow-up session.
Gotcha. And Hamilton, you touched on something that, you know, is going on continuously around us are all these digital events. I was actually curious to hear a little bit on your thoughts on what you've liked about them, what has been less effective, just to get a sense of, have you been enjoying them thus far, and do you think they're effective for you and what you're trying to accomplish?
I think in many ways they're effective in what I'm trying to do. I mean, they don't really replace the face-to-face contact and the fact that I can really make a true pitch to people or really give them a honest to goodness demo. But being able to meet people, kind of have that initial contact and be able to schedule a follow-up, that's been working fine. And then I find that a lot of the networking and coffee sessions on Discord has, you know, good to decent effect in terms of being able to meet people. It's maybe not exactly what I'm looking for, but often people will go, that sounds really interesting, I know somebody who might be able to use that, and I'll get an introduction from that. So it's just kind of it's a more staggered approach where it's not a direct thing, but I'll eventually get there.
I think an interesting thing about those digital communities is that I think it makes the industry a bit more accessible to people who don't know everybody right away. Like one of the things that we talked about was, you know, we're going to go into our Rolodex and start calling friends and friends of friends to try to get things done in this time when we can't show up at physical events. But that's very difficult for new members of the industry to do, that by definition, they kind of don't have all of that already. And so the fact that if you just kind of know one person on this panel or find somebody on Twitter and you're like, hey, can you show me that Discord link? And then suddenly you're in front of everybody. Now you don't need to buy a GDC ticket and a plane ticket and all these different things that you might need to feel like you can break in. Now you can just break in kind of digitally, which I think is net good for the industry and net good for kind of new entrants into the business.
I'm super curious, Astrid, if you wouldn't mind speaking to that as well, because I know in the beginning you mentioned like traveling to GDC, doing all these
Yeah.
things as a smaller studio. It's a lot of resource to pump in. Have you found these digital events make it easier in some ways, maybe harder in others?
I think I hope at some point it finds like a good balance. So first of all, in my studio, we only allow one return flight per year because of climate changes. So that means going to GDC or PAX this year, if it wasn't for Corona, would have been like I go to PAX and then I take the train to GDC and then I fly back. So I spend a lot of my traveling time in a train, and going online is in that regard amazing. But I also have to admit there's been so many digital events, and it's different because suddenly you have to be there from maybe 9 a.m. in your time zone until like 12 o'clock in the evening in your time zone. When going to GDC, okay, this week there's like no kids and I'm just on 24/7. But being home, you kind of don't plan for the digital events the same way. So suddenly you're doing like a whole Amaze festival that's running right now, a whole dishes, and you're also like doing your everyday life. So I hope at some point it finds a balance. Of course, all of the events had to go online this year. I hope in the future I can go like one live event and then the rest online. That would be my dream.
Yeah, I can totally commiserate with that because it's been interesting in that, I was always on a plane like every other week. It felt like traveling to an event, and it was easier to segment work and the kind of like downtime where I could just not think about work. Whereas now it's like every single week there's a digital event and there's always somebody to talk to or something to do. And you don't have the, not excuse, but the reason of, hey, I'm just going to go sit down for a second because I've been on my feet for 12 hours. Now it's the inverse of now I want to stand up because I've been sitting down for 12 hours. So yeah, it's been interesting to see what digital events have how they've changed the landscape overall.
I think it's really good that developers from like all over the world can suddenly meet. Like I know for myself, I now have an even broader network to people, not only in Europe and US, which is like easy enough to get a network there, but also in Asia and South America and Africa. People have been reaching out to me from those regions, and that's just amazing. So that's I think is the huge benefit of all of this.
That's a really good point too. And I know, Hamilton, if I remember correctly, you've had a similar experience, right? Where you've had the capability of reaching out and had people reach out to you from various regions that you normally wouldn't have, correct?
Yeah, I really don't have the contacts in Africa, but I've had a lot of, recent connections in Africa. And having recently lived in Russia, and I really kind of understand how they're dealing with like different monetary solutions. Just the challenges that they're facing there is something that we were constantly facing in Russia. And so like I find all the people that I've met very relatable, and they're just super awesome people. And I'm just really glad that I've had that opportunity.
What's it been like for Riot, Brendan? I imagine you guys are just getting buffeted with stuff all the time from all over, but has it changed at all recently?
I think the biggest change is that in the last month we announced our focus on investing in underrepresented founders. And so I think honestly, I don't think a lot of people are aware of the fact that Riot does minority investments in game companies. And so a lot of the deals that we do, we either don't talk about or show up as like a little blip in some article somewhere. And so people are often surprised to hear that that's a full-time job for me. And then when we went out and said, oh, not only do we do that, but we're going to do that with the specific focus, a lot of people kind of came out of the woodwork, which is fantastic. And so the inbound has been more insane than it's ever been, which I think has been really helpful in kind of energizing me and keeping me going through this time.
No, and that's actually super interesting too to think about, because I look towards the future and I kind of wonder, are any of you interested or excited to be living out of a suitcase again, or are you kind of liking this being able to stay home?
I certainly think that physical events will return. I hope at least. I wouldn't want to live out of a suitcase. I think, John, you probably travel more than any of us. I don't know that I can handle quite what you do, but I think the idea, again, going back to what Astrid said, if there's something about having the density of everybody showing up at the same place at the same time with the same focus that allows you to accomplish things that I think digital events just don't. And then I think there's another aspect of it, which is kind of under-mentioned, which is that those events are very fun. and it's a good time to get together and get your batteries recharged a little bit about why you work in the games industry. And 364 days a year, it might feel like work, and then you go and you sit on the floor and you're like, oh my God, look at all the cool stuff that's getting made. Look at all the wonderful people in this industry. This is so fun. And I think that that's really healthy, and I think that's something that I'm personally looking forward to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
personally, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go for it, Astrid.
Okay, yeah, I'm really looking forward to be back at event like GDC or Gamescom, and just like random pass by friends and meet their friends, and having all of that going on again. But I also must say, like, having a family, like last time I was like 8 months pregnant at GDC, that's also hard work. So I'm really looking forward to go to like 1 or 2 events and then spend all my time there, and then be allowed to be a bit more home as well. I think I learned I don't need that much travel.
I think one of the key things that's missing right now that we get from the physical event is not only meeting the people, but being able to go out for a drink, or, have some activity at an event, be it playing video games together or dancing or karaoke or whatever. And I think it's those shared experiences that really bring, if you're meeting a publisher and you're going to be working with them for a long time, that builds sort of team spirit that it's really difficult to recreate in this online world.
There's also something about serendipity that I think is very difficult to recreate in a digital environment. I think, when you go to an event, there's almost like a basic versus applied research kind of metaphor that I would use, which is like, sometimes you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to accomplish. I've got these 4 people to talk to, and then other times you're just there to be present, and you'll find out that after 5 years of being in the industry, you see a lot of the same people at certain events and things, and suddenly now that person works at this cool company and you want to work with them. And some of those like really kind of like deep lead time relationships are not something you can plan for, and not something that you can, look somebody up on LinkedIn. And so I think that is missing. I think that the lead times on noticing that will be a little bit long. I think, what you'll find is that in a couple of years, if this continues like this, you'll be like, oh, I haven't had some of those serendipitous relationships spring up the way that I used to. And I think that it'll be important for us to find a way to recreate those.
Yeah, I totally agree. It actually brings me back to going to an event last year where it was just, randomly at 2 a.m. finding myself sitting at a bar with a bunch of people talking about games. And like that is harder to come by. And it's cool to see digital events trying to replace that, but it's still not quite there. But while we're on this topic of digital events, kind of the return to physical at some point, are there have you seen the value of meeting virtually during this time permanently changing how we do business as an industry? Do you see more of these events or digital meetings in general becoming more heavily incorporated? Or do you think it's going to be more like back to, hey, you need to be there, you need to be at a GDC, or you need to be at an E3?
I think it'll be a bit of both. I think that the digital habits that we have now will probably persist, and that suddenly it feels a little bit more appropriate to be like, hey, let's just get on a call and chat this out a little bit, as opposed to saying like, GDC's in 3 weeks, I'll just wait till then and have all my meetings. So I think to some degree that will persist. I think it's important though that depending on what side of BizDev you're on, whether you're a buyer or a seller, there's a competitive component to it. I think when everybody is stuck at home and you're trying to beat somebody for a sale or beat somebody into a deal, you're all competing on the same level playing field of Zoom. I think once you're in a world where I can demonstrate my commitment to the account or to this deal by flying to see you, well, suddenly now I think everybody else in the industry will be like, shit, I got to get back on a plane because this guy's going to be having dinner with them tonight and I've got to be there to sit, And so I think to some degree, just like the basic competitive elements and aspects of our industry will force people to get back out and push each other back into a little bit of the old world. But I think I do think that some of the digital habits are here to stay.
Yeah, I agree very much with that. I think a lot of some things will stay, but a lot of the things will also go back to normal as soon as an event. Then we will I can see just with the opening of Denmark, we've been locked down and everybody been home for a couple of months, and then it's just like this, and then everything is running like it's always been.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see it. I do see a lot of value in having hybrid events just to give people more access. I was mentoring at Games for Change last week, and there were people from all over America that were attending that festival that normally were like, I would never be able to go to New York for this thing. And so I think there's a value for those people, and I think that would be like either a free ticket or a very cheap ticket for people. But then again, really to make deals and the people that are focused on business, they're gonna have to have those face-to-face meetings. So, but I think it allows a level of balance, at least in Finland, that I think a lot of people are striving for. So I really think we will find some sort of happy medium in a hybrid event.
I think the hope is that a lot of the skills that event organizers have learned about how to manage a digital event well will persist. And so, they'll go into their next physical event planning being like, well, actually, I learned this lesson last year from this digital event that if we do X, Y, Z, it really opens the floor. And I'm hoping so that there's more of that, because I do think it's really good for the accessibility for the people who can't travel for any number of reasons.
And Brennan, you bring up a good point of, right now everyone is trying to do business digitally, or for the most part, everybody is, because I know some places are starting to open up. What are some ways that you found to be effective in making yourself stand out or showing some kind of commitment to, hey, like you're an important person I want to do business with? Like, what have you found to be effective there?
I think I'm very fortunate to be, a part of a larger company where people often want to work with Riot. And so I don't have, I like to joke that I feel like I have this handicap helping me be better at my job, that I would probably not be this effective anywhere else because people are excited about working with Riot generally. But I think that the ways that we stand out, at least in corporate development, is there's a lot of money coming into games right now from all over the place, whether it's venture capital, essentially places that we're not used to seeing money come from, and that is, I think, an excellent thing for the industry, because I think that means more cool games getting met. But it does make my job a little bit harder, because now we're not the only people providing this type of financing. We have to compete a little bit more for deals. Valuations are going up. But I think at the end of the day, the thing that Riot will always win on, and that I'm hoping that I'm winning on, is that when it comes to talking to game developers, they generally would rather talk to somebody who plays video games. And so I still think that the way we stand out is by, I'll sit and I'll be like, tell me what inspired this game, or I'll see it and I'm like, oh, that's just like this and that other game that I played. And I think that, most of us are in this industry because we love games, we love talking about games, and I think that that's going to be a competitive advantage for a long time.
Actually, that does make me think about too, have there been any deals or any business that you guys observe, any industry news that's really stood out to you of probably being something that we wouldn't have seen at any other time, just due to the situation? Or do you think it's probably anything that's come up recently is probably in the works and been something that was planned?
I think our industry is in general in 2020 reflecting a lot on how we do things. COVID, of course, COVID made us rethink how we work together, how we plan our work days, what kind of work environment are we creating. Should people be able to work more from home, especially places where daycare is expensive? And then I also think with the whole movement of Black Lives Matters, we also had to look at all of us ourselves and ask if we are actually doing things in an ethical way. And all of those things combined, I think we have an industry that is right now also reflecting a lot in general on how we do things, which is positive, and a change that is needed. And we can see a lot of both big companies, but I also see indie studios now actively working with this. So if you just step a bit out of the lockdown and just take 2020, I think that's an interesting year for the game industry. I mean, we see a lot of new initiatives, hopefully helping the industry forward in a new way in the future.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I've been very pleased that as I kind of kick off our efforts for, getting financing to these underrepresented developers, and, I'm calling a lot of our big corporate partners that we work with on a day-to-day basis and letting them know what I'm doing. There seems to be a greater awareness and an excitement and an eagerness to address this problem in a very sincere and authentic way. I think there's been a lot of messaging around, this is something we stand with Black Lives Matter, et cetera. But now I'm hearing the rumblings of all of that coming into action. I think even in just the next few months, a lot of these companies that kind of came to the commitment of this is something I want to do are now going to be demonstrating what that commitment looks like for them. And I think that that's a fantastic thing. And then I think as far as, just the more standard kind of professional news goes, I think any of the organizations that are doing things that are kind of like games adjacent or span between games and the way you live other aspects of your entertainment life are getting a boost from the current times. I think there's, no question that like when concerts aren't possible and then you've got a Travis Scott concert in Fortnite that, it's not like Epic Games needed any help getting to a larger valuation with the work that they're doing lately, but certainly you could see how that, their $18 billion valuation from some of their recent investments might have been pushed along by people seeing that trend more than they otherwise would have. And I think that you're seeing that on the other end of the spectrum with young startups, like we've got Wave VR out of Los Angeles, that recently did a big John Legend concert. I think that type of business is getting a huge push. And I think the people that are, innovating very quickly and finding really cool solutions to these problems in a very short time period are going to be huge beneficiaries of that.
Yeah, my concern here is really sort of the divide between the haves and the have-nots. I think bigger companies and companies that have games out there are doing quite well and kind of living off successes. I know a lot of smaller studios that have publishing deals slow down, stop, get canceled. As the publishers themselves are trying to figure out how this is going to work and what's going to work for them. And IGDA did a lot of stuff in the beginning of this for mental health. And a lot of bigger companies have really addressed that. If you're a small indie studio of 10 people, you don't have the resources for that. And these are kind of the concerns I have. And I would like to see more general resources pop out of this to be more supportive of indies.
Makes a lot of sense. One last question before we go to Q&A, because this was kind of touched upon in what you all had just said. Have you noticed that there is almost an effort to catch up to kind of that slump we had at the beginning of this? Do you think people are generally in BD just trying to go extra hard because, we had those about 2 months of downtime? I've just kind of observed this to some extent. So I was curious to hear your thoughts on this.
I don't feel there's been a downtime.
That's also fair.
But that's maybe just us in our studio.
I was going to say, I don't feel a downtime, but I know everybody in Finland is on vacation this month. So like everything is really slowed down for me.
That's true. I think a lot of my work with European partners has slowed down as the summer comes, which is frankly a nice break for me too. It helps me get some of my focus work done, which I think is a good thing. And on the corp dev side, I think there was a little bit of a period where things were slowing down because I think a lot of the kind of venture capital groups were uncertain what the new market would look like and if they wanted to keep investing. And so that made startups be like, maybe I'll wait a couple of weeks before doing my pitch, or they're not hearing the same traction. But honestly, I feel like that was very short-lived. I just think a lot of those people are here to stay, and the startups that are trying to get money from them are just as eager as ever to find ways to do that. The one thing that I do think is really interesting is that I've seen more and more pitches lately that are for much smaller amounts of money, and they're saying essentially, well, we just might not ever have an office. When you look at what a young startup with, 12 people, and they're like, hey, this is our 2-year roadmap, some sizable portion of that money was going to an office in LA. And now they're like, actually, we're starting distributed. That'll probably just be our culture from the get-go. That means we can hire from anywhere. Our hiring costs are going to go down. The costs of Riot will obviously disappear. And I think that's like a very meaningful difference that will probably persist for a while. And I'm curious to see in 5 years as all these games from these companies that are starting right now launch and those companies grow and increase their influence, and more big companies are competing with them for employees, if generally that shift towards kind of a remote distributed work from home lifestyle will take deeper root.
That makes a lot of sense. Cool. With that, I think we're going to go to Q&A just so we have some time to answer some questions. Let me just pull this up. Interesting. Sorry, I'm just reading through these real fast. Okay. I have a question here from, if I'm understanding this question correctly, have your companies or companies you know of, have there been hiring freezes? Has there been kind of a slowdown in getting more people onto the team, or has it been pretty steady in regards to getting new people, specifically in BD?
We hired 2 people during this time. Like we hired 2 people since April, and we are still looking forward to hire more people. because you still need to make games, and there's still publisher and funds who want to invest in games. So for us, it haven't changed. I know that we are looking a bit more outside Denmark, but I think that's very positive.
Yeah, this might be another case of the haves and the have-nots. I think, Riot has been fortunate to, like Chris mentioned, kind of live off of our past successes to some degree. And though, of course, we did launch several games this year as well. But we've done a lot of hiring. It's been very interesting, I think, from a cultural standpoint, to see what it looks like for somebody to be having worked at a company for many months and never met any of their coworkers. We had a conversation somewhat recently where somebody who's been at the company for almost a year was saying goodbye to somebody they've worked with for a long time. And they're like, yeah, I think I've met you in person once, because there's just the way the schedules overlapped. And that's a very kind of odd thing, but we're fortunate to have not slowed down. But I'm not sure that that's necessarily true for the smaller, more mid-sized companies as well.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
We're obviously still hiring, but I know a lot of studios in Finland that are hiring. Rovio's been hiring and expanding, so yeah, things are kind of going full steam ahead.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. This one is a little bit not personal per se, but it's interesting. As different countries start opening up, like for example, Denmark is starting to come out of lockdown, America is starting to get worse and worse. How are each of you feeling at the prospect of potentially traveling anytime soon? Is it something that's completely off the table for you? Is it something maybe within your own countries as they come online? How are you each thinking about that?
I cannot wait to travel again. And so, but obviously right now it's not a particularly safe time to do so. I would very much love to be able to go visit Astrid and hang out somewhere safe and healthy, but I think wisely they won't accept me right now. And so at the moment it becomes safe and responsible for us to travel again, I think a lot of us will. But yeah, I think to do so before it's safe and healthy would be like kind of reckless.
Yeah, as it is now, I would not travel. I can look forward to it and make imaginary plans of all the vacation and events I would go to. But like normally, I would already now start planning for GDC to get like affordable prices and so on, and I'm not at all, because even though it's in March next year, I'm not even sure it's gonna happen. At least online probably, but
Yeah. Being based in Finland, things are more or less safe, but I mean, I'm still taking things very cautiously. When I think of vacation time, I'm probably going to go to a national park in Finland, or maybe I will, brave the ferry and go to Estonia for some time. And that's pretty much the extent of what I'm thinking. I mean, I'm wondering, will I fly home to the States for Christmas? Like, I don't know. So it's really sort of, I'll take it as it comes and just look at the situation. But at least for now, in the immediate term, I'm not really thinking of anything.
I think that's where most of the industry's at. Like, I really want to go to Japan just for fun, but that's probably not on the table anytime soon. They probably won't have me. Let's go on. I'm just having to parse these as we go. This is actually interesting. I'll phrase this one a little bit differently, but still get at the essence of what is being asked here. Kowloon, as well as Riot, did you have any significant impact for deals that were started prior to lockdown, or did those kind of just navigate as they normally would?
Yeah, I saw the question. I want to make sure that we answer the intent here. I couldn't tell if it was, things that changed as things transitioned, or was it pitches that began and originated after lockdown? I can kind of answer both to make sure we get coverage on that. But certainly there were changes. I think, one of the bigger deals that Riot was proud to be involved in was Mainframe Industries, and that was started at Slush, which and then kind of became a digital relationship very quickly. Just given the nature of the fact that we're based in LA. And so there's been a handful of those where, you met somebody in person and then it transitioned digitally, but we have closed several deals since that were purely originated during lockdown. There's a handful of people that I'm now in business with that, I've never met and I might never meet. And honestly, I think it's kind of a nice thing that we're normalizing that relationship to some degree. Is, it's frankly not super necessary to meet everybody you want to do business with. I understand that at times it's really helpful, and I think for building relationships it can be valuable, and for first introducing somebody and finding out, oh hey, I had no idea I wanted to work with you, but now it turns out I do. That stuff is super nice for in person, but I have absolutely nothing against, you know, investing money into a company, you know, after a Zoom call.
Okay, if I put the Kowloon hat on and take triple topping off, I think, let me see, yeah, we are also making deals with people that reached out during the lockdown and that we haven't met at GDC or any other events. We get a lot of stuff coming both like inbound, or people connect to us directly, or through the Meet to Match and different business online events. I think, I'm not sure, but sometimes I have the feeling we maybe do a few more calls and playtests with the devs, but I think that's actually, that's good. And for some of the people that are contacting us, I'm looking forward to at some point meet them in person and see where they're actually working. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Hamilton, what's your experience been with that, out of curiosity? Chris, excuse me.
Finland keeps raising money. You know, it kind of seems amazing that way. I mean, part of it is just because Finland is so small and has such a tight network, and there are a couple small companies that are based here that put seed money in, and then bigger money follows. And a lot of those opinions are highly well respected by other investors. So in that sense, everything's flowing pretty much as normal.
Gotcha. And then we have one more question. I'm trying to understand what it's actually asking. It seems as if it's asking, is it problematic that not having an office can reduce your overall budget ask for making games, especially for indies? Would we consider that to actually be an actual problem? Like, for example, I guess I would point this to you, Astrid, do you see it as actually being an issue of your budget being smaller considering you don't have an office, or do you think that's independent of what you would ask as an indie developer?
So I don't think that, I think both as investors, we shouldn't be like, oh, but now you can do it cheaper because you can just sit at home. Because if you want to design a company with a good work culture, maybe you decide that for you it's best to work remotely, that people are working from home, but you still need to provide them a desk and a computer and licenses. So what would you save there? You would maybe only save actually the rent to the physical office space. But when people are working remotely, you would maybe have to sometimes spend extra money on bringing people together or doing something else for them because you want to care for your employees. It's not like you can hire someone and then you just can like find the laptop and then they go sit on the sofa and make an amazing game. I simply don't believe in that. I think working with people always has a price, and you need to include that in your budget. At least if I saw a pitch in Colonize, I can ask it, like I could ask people, hey, have you thought about how people have a good time working with you? And that's a question you should ask.
I'll echo those same things. Which is like, I think there are a lot of different ways to work to be successful making games, but if a source of financing is saying, hey, we saw average deals go down because people don't need offices, so your budget should go down too, that doesn't strike me as a particularly sophisticated source of financing. And so, you know, we always aim to say like, how much money do you need to solve the problems you're trying to solve and why? And I think as long as you're having an intelligent conversation about the difference between remote and in person through that conversation, you should be okay.
Yeah, I look at the 4 Good Games example where both of the founders have kids. They were so happy. They were looking for office space during COVID. They were so happy to get their office. They're in an incubator. It's like all good. There are all sorts of other people that they can meet, so it's also good. But another company here in Helsinki is looking at completely rearranging their office. They've really embraced the work at home style, but they're like, okay, these rooms that we have here, we don't need to put desks in them. We need to have couches, maybe a video game console. We need to have more of those happy collisions for our office workers. So maybe they come into work 1 or 2 days a week, but it's more for meetings and socializing than it is to actually get things done.
Gotcha,
but
that makes sense.
They still want an office.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see long term how many studios determine to go completely remote and those that return to an office or decide to get one. That's kind of one of the things that I've been looking at and seeing how that shift may occur over time. Cool. So it looks like we got through all of our Q&A questions. I want to make sure to wrap up with the opportunity for each of you to give a shout out to either the games you're working on, your company, or just something that you care about. Astrid, I know you have a game coming out very shortly, so I want to start with you.
2 games. I think this week you can actually play our demo on Xbox for free, and we also have a similar version on Steam as a prologue. It's called Welcome to Elk, and it's a game based on true stories. And I just played through the full game today at the office, and it's a good game. I'm proud of it. And later this year we are releasing Genvid together with Niflas. And if you love platformers with no platforms and want to feel like a space dolphin, that's your game.
I need to go play that immediately. I had played the demo for Welcome to Elk, so I'll have to go circle back to the second one. And
there's also a demo actually on Steam for Genvid, so you can try both of them.
Oh, awesome. Hamilton, what about yourself?
Yeah, no games, because the games that I'm sort of associated with are deep in development. But I can give the Genvid Tech plug, genvidtech.com. I'm really excited about what we're doing, and I'm working with some really cool developers in Helsinki, helping bring that whole viewer-centric experience to games. I'm excited about it.
Nice. And Brendan?
I think the thing I'm most excited about right now is just the number of really talented underrepresented developers that we've been able to find. And I've been particularly excited to see how many organizations have been doing really good work in that space for a long time and maybe flown under the radar. And I think over the next several months and hopefully several years, those organizations are going to get a brighter spotlight shown on them. And I'm just really excited to see where that goes for our industry.
Nice. Yeah, I'm super excited for that as well. Cool. Well, thank you all for joining us. This has been super fun. I hope everybody watching, you had a good time as well. But yeah, thanks for joining us all.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.